Do you believe that every main character has to change?
No. I do think that something has to change. In other words, if you have an unchanging main character, then either that unchanging main character is going to have to deal with a world which the world needs to change, and so they are unchangingly trying to change others, or you're going to have a situation where you may fear that they're going to change, and then in fact they don't. That's a good story. A cool story could be somebody who you like, and then things happen to them and you think, oh man, they're going to lose their idealism, or they're going to, whatever it is. And the story is actually about how they manage not to change. So it is possible to not have the character change, but the world around that idealistic character changed and threatened their ability to remain idealistic. Or they are faced with this, like you get some person who's good and you don't want them to change, but then they move to a new place. Or the place that they are in changes and they have to deal with things that it worked while they were one way, but now can they still be that way? There's a lot of good stories in which a person doesn't change, but they change others, or and very often it's just one. Like it'll be a story about how someone learns from someone else. Actually, the Shawshank Redemption is kind of a good version of that, because Andy doesn't change. He stays the course, and it's the people around him who learn from him. You can always theorize or formulate a way to say, oh, he changed, but I don't know. I always worry about any theory that says everything must be the same. All characters must change. That troubles me. I don't know that there is any rule absolute to all stories. I believe that there's different possibilities, and the only thing I think, and this one could be, there's probably a good argument against it. The only thing that I can think of that's absolutely universal to all stories is they have to begin and end somewhere. At some point you have to start, and at some point you have to end. What goes on in between? There's many possibilities. And some are more familiar or popular than others. But to say there's an absolute rule that all stories work this way, I just guarantee I'll find a great story that doesn't work that way.
Now, with action, would you say that there's a lot of change? I mean, I get there's change in the story in that usually the bad guys are taken down in some sense. But let's say if we take Die Hard, since it's around Christmas and that usually plays around this time, does Bruce Willis's character really change in that film?
No, I don't think so at all. I think that he doesn't change. He's facing an increasing series of challenges. And honestly, I think the question of Die Hard is simply, can he do it? Just that simple. And I think that the thing that people don't admit is when we're watching a movie like Die Hard, we know he's going to do it. Right. So the pleasure of Die Hard is not whether or not he's going to do it, it's how. And that's really great. But that's why Die Hard is so great, because the how is so much fun. It's unexpected, it's the levels increase, there's twists and turns to how. But the idea that he is going to fail, honestly, I don't think anybody believes that.
Right, okay.
So that's one of the things that when we say, like, you have to fear that Bruce Willis is going to die, I don't think anybody watching Die Hard really thought that was going to end with him dead on the ground and everyone else blown up. No, we knew that. So our pleasure in a story like that is how. And that's where the invention and the revelation comes in. Like if he does it, by being unexpectedly nice to someone, which admittedly is not Die Hard, but there are stories like that where somehow or other, or there's many stories of like the apparently weak, ineffectual person finds in themselves the strength to do the strong thing. Honestly, I don't think any of us watching that mild, ineffectual person at the beginning ever thought, well, that's just going to stay the same for the whole movie. We know they're going to come and be the hero, if nothing else from the trailer.
Sure, right. If a character doesn't have to change, What is the purpose of character arcs?
Well, in the story of a person who doesn't change, the arc is going to be, how do they find a way to stay themselves in the face of unexpected, arcing, increasing threats to their ability to stay themselves. So the arc is, what do they discover in themselves that says, you know what, I'm going to stay myself. There's going to be a point at which they're going to say, I could walk away, I could quit, I may fail. Whatever the things are that is a threat to that self, that is going to be the arc, is how they deal with that, how they stay true. So the arc doesn't have to be how they change, it can be how they learn that they have more in them than they thought. I would say, if we were talking about Die Hard before, in Die Hard, I don't think that McClane had previously had to swing around the outside of a building and run on broken glass. Those were things he was doing for the first time. And so therefore the arc is, can he do it? Is he going to make it across that glass? Spoiler, a mild spoiler.
So what, over 30 years?
Yeah, I think it is. Anyway, so I believe the answer is, there's always an arc, in the sense that to me, the arc is, how will the character get what they want or what they are trying to do in the face of difficult obstacles. Now, that does not usually that is, oh, I thought I was gonna have to just be real friendly to everyone and then I would get what I wanted. Okay, no, I'm gonna have to go around the outside and cheat somebody in order to get what I want. That's their arc. They had to change. They had to learn a new skill or option. But often it's, I'm an old-fashioned person and the world has become modern. And then the challenge is, during the story, is like, there's a point at which they say, maybe I should just maybe this old-fashioned thing isn't right. But then they're like, you know what? It is. And all the people in the story who are saying you can't stay old-fashioned, it will be about, how do you either persevere through that, or how do you convince them to support it? Whatever it is, you have to define, what is it that they are trying to do, and what are the obstacles, and what steps get to the thing that resolves that question. Because the question is always going to be, how do they do what they're trying to do when it's hard, when something is in the way, when something is making it difficult for them? And that's the sort of basic mechanics of most stories. Is not all, because I don't believe all stories have anything, but most familiar Western stories will be somebody trying to do something, and there's something that's making it difficult. And so they'll try something to solve that, and it'll not work, or it'll make things worse, or it'll only work partially. And so they have to think, okay, what new thing will fix this not working? And then they try that new thing. And then sometimes there's complications that arise from the thing they're trying. Sometimes, often, things get worse. That's what an arc is. But that arc could be, how do I stay the same when everything is begging me to change?
You had me thinking of the Truman Show, because, you're talking about, nice and polite and everything. And Truman's arc, I don't know if we saw it coming, when we first watch a good portion of the movie, and it kind of reveals itself. We don't realize what journey he's on.
Yes. Actually, that's another good example of a character who, he doesn't change, in the sense that the essential Truman-ness of him, the nice, friendly, kind of overly optimistic guy,
right?
That's his last line. No, not going to give it away, but we know that he's still that guy. The question of the Truman Show is, and I think that this is safe, it's not a spoiler, the question is, can he get out of the restrained situation he's in, and if he does, will he be okay? And I believe that by the end of the story, we know he will be okay. But the question all the way through is, wow, can he stay the same when he is no longer in a cocoon of a created world?
Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. Here is a complimentary question from our book Story Questions.